Welcome to this high-stakes clinical explainer. Today, we're opening a formal investigative symposium into one of the absolute most profound physiological mysteries of human biology. I'm talking about cellular decline. For decades, the medical establishment has largely accepted that the rapid aging of our bodies is a total inevitability, like it's a fixed one-way street governed entirely by our birth certificates. But as we're going to see, emerging clinical data is literally forcing us to completely rewrite that entire narrative. As clinical researchers, what we're looking at today isn't just theory, it's rigorous, heavily documented science that totally upends our assumptions about aging. And just a quick note before we dive in, this symposium is strictly an advanced educational lesson on cellular physiology. We aren't offering direct medical advice or prescribing treatments. We're just here to rigorously analyze the peer-reviewed evidence behind a staggering biological breakthrough. So the central mystery we are unspooling today is what we call the silent cellular drop. Basically, as we get older, our body's internal repair mechanisms essentially just power down. We're looking directly at the biological countdown clock of our telomeres, and really the tragic dormancy of our master repair cells. It makes you wonder, right? Why do the very cells that are completely designed to rebuild our tissue, repair our joints, and keep our organs functioning suddenly just go to sleep? And absolutely more importantly, can we actually wake them up? Here is our clinical roadmap for today's explainer. We're going to start with the silent cellular drop, followed by the forgotten golden root. Then we'll break down the specific mechanisms of cellular reactivation, review some fascinating global clinical trial data, and finally, detail the amplification protocol. Let's jump right into section 1, the silent cellular drop, specifically focusing on telomeres and the dormant reserve. To truly understand how to reverse cellular decline, we first have to understand the internal breakdown that's actively occurring inside the adult human body as we age. Think of your cells exactly like rechargeable batteries, and on the terminals of those batteries are protective caps. Those caps are your telomeres. Every single time your cells divide, a tiny sliver of that protective cap gets shaved off. Eventually, the cap disappears entirely, and when that happens, well, the cell can no longer divide. It either dies or, worse, it enters a toxic, zombie-like state called senescence. Now, what is genuinely shocking here is that your body actually possesses an essential repair enzyme called telomerase, which is literally designed to rebuild those caps. But in adult cells, the gene that produces telomerase gets dialed down to almost nothing. It's exactly like having a pristine repair kit locked safely in a cabinet, but your biology has just taken the key and thrown it away. And while your telomeres are fraying, a second tragedy is quietly occurring right inside your bone marrow. See, young, mobilized stem cells are constantly patrolling the bloodstream for damage, fixing tissue right on the spot. But when we look at aging, dormant stem cells, it's a completely different story. You have roughly 60 to 70 million of these master repair cells housed in your bone marrow, but as you age, they just stop patrolling. They sit there completely idle. It's a biological catastrophe. It's honestly like having a crew of highly trained firefighters fast asleep in the station while the building right next door is actively burning down to the ground. The cells are there, they just aren't receiving the signal to move. Which brings us to section 2, the forgotten golden root, a 2,000-year-old biological lockpick. The answer to waking up those dormant cells doesn't come from some incredibly expensive $10,000 injection at a luxury overseas clinic. Astonishingly enough, it's a deeply researched botanical compound that's available in most health stores for under $15. And the scale of the scientific validation behind this is frankly staggering. We're talking about Astragalus membranaceus. In traditional Chinese medicine, it's been prescribed continuously for over 2,000 years to restore something called wei, or defensive energy. And what's absolutely fascinating is that this concept of wei maps almost perfectly onto modern immunology and stem cell biology. Despite often being met with blank stares in a typical Western doctor's office, there are currently over 1,600 modern, peer-reviewed studies published on its active compounds. As clinical researchers, what genuinely shocks us is the exact mechanism at play here. Astragalus membranaceus contains highly specific polysaccharides and saponins that chemically act as a lockpick. It operates as a literal biological fire alarm inside the human body. It actually jolts the 60 million dormant bone marrow cells awake and forcefully pushes them back into active circulation. Let's look exactly at how it achieves this. Let's move into section 3, mechanisms of cellular reactivation, exploring 4 distinct biological pathways. We're now going to formally open up the clinical breakdown of exactly how this root alters human cellular physiology on a molecular level. There are 4 distinct pathways we need to examine. 1. Telomerase reactivation. 2. Stem cell mobilization. 3. Anti-senescence protection. And 4. Immune system recalibration. And I really want to emphasize to everyone tuning in that we are not discussing folk medicine here. We are looking at measurable, reproducible biology. Let's break down pathway 1. Zeroing right in on pathway 1, we're looking at a specific triterpenoid compound within the root called cycloostrogenol. When this molecule crosses into your cells, it directly upregulates the transcription of the tiered gene. Now, that is the literal genetic blueprint for telomerase. Laboratory studies show this increases telomerase activity by 1.3 to 3.3 fold. This isn't just some subtle nudge to the system. This is physically switching the dormant telomerase engine back on to rebuild those fraying chromosome caps. And then we look at pathway 2, which is frankly astonishing. A compound called astragaloside IV activates the AMPK signaling cascade right inside your hematopoietic stem cells. What does that actually mean in plain English? It supercharges the mitochondria, the power plants, inside your stem cells. Irradiated mouse models actually demonstrated that providing this mitochondrial energy allowed the stem cells to enter the bloodstream and rebuild the bone marrow pool at triple the normal rate. It's just a profound physiological response. Now, let's combine pathways 3 and 4, which essentially deal with protection and environment. The specific polysaccharides in astragalus maintain critical pluripotency genes, specifically NANOG, SOX2, and OCT4, which keep your adult stem cells capable of turning into whatever tissue you actually need. But even more importantly, it halts those zombie cells we mentioned earlier from constantly leaking inflammatory chemicals. By modulating the Th1 to Th2 ratio, it calms chronic, low-grade inflammation, often called inflammaging. It effectively silences the background noise of the whole immune system just to clear a perfectly safe path for those newly awakened stem cells. Next up, Section 4, Global Clinical Trial Data and the Evidence for Age Reversal Markers. So we've seen the molecular theory, right? But what actually happens when you administer these compounds to living subjects in double-blind, peer-reviewed trials? Well, we have to look closely at the data on these trials because it is staggering. A trial at the Sorbonne in Paris gave healthy human volunteers this exact extract for 6 months, resulting in a statistically significant lengthening of critically short telomeres. But the trial in Poland is even wilder. Researchers exposed human lymphocytes to this extract for just 3 days. In that incredibly short 72-hour window, the telomere elongation was equivalent to reversing 6.8 years of biological aging. Think about that for a second. Reversing nearly 7 years of cellular decline in just 3 days of exposure. Wow. Now, the absolutely crucial point we must address here is safety. Historically, the huge medical concern has always been that activating telomerase might accidentally fuel cancer cell replication. But data from the Spanish National Cancer Research Center totally addressed this. They demonstrated that this highly purified extract increased average telomere length in aging mice without increasing cancer incidence at all. It basically operates in this beautifully safe therapeutic window. Let's look at Section 5, the amplification protocol, covering extraction, synergies, and consistency. Moving into the strictly educational application of all this clinical data, the evidence points toward a very specific dual extraction method. To properly get the water-soluble polysaccharides, the protocol requires 10 to 15 grams of the root, gently simmered into a tea, and taken in the early morning. This perfectly matches the body's natural cortisol rhythm and maximizes immune cell mobilization. But for the fat-soluble supponents, like astragaloside IV, you need a 250 milligram standardized extract capsule taken with healthy fats, twice daily. You absolutely must cycle this too, 5 days on, 2 days off, just to prevent the body from downregulating its receptor sensitivity. And crucially, it requires a minimum of 90 days of absolute consistency if you want to see these actual structural cellular shifts. And what's really interesting is that clinical researchers note you can amplify these stem cell effects by up to 400% through highly specific synergistic foods. For example, 200 milliliters of pomegranate juice stimulates mitophagy, which is the recycling of dead mitochondria. Lion's mane mushroom supports neurogenesis. A cup of wild blueberries independently increases circulating stem cell counts. 30 to 50 grams of broccoli sprouts activates your NRF2 antioxidant defense. And finally, green tea brewed at exactly 175 degrees gives massive antioxidant support. But listen to this vital clinical warning. You must never, ever add dairy to this tea. The casein proteins found in cow's milk actually bind to the catechins and will destroy up to 80% of the green tea's critical benefits. As we wrap up this clinical explainer, I want you to consider the reality of your own physiology. Researchers sum it up brilliantly with this quote: "Your 60 million stem cells are still sitting in your bone marrow, waiting for the signal to mobilize." Cellular aging is not just a fixed sentence handed down by your genetics. The science completely proves that human beings possess profound, literal authority over their own biology, provided they simply supply their body with the correct raw materials. So, we want to leave you with this somewhat dramatic question to think about. If the tools for profound cellular regeneration are literally already inside your bones right now, what choices will you make tomorrow morning to finally wake them up? We highly urge you to reconsider the daily foundations of your health and invite you to continue exploring the advanced clinical research into cellular repair. Thank you so much for joining our symposium today.